Welcome to the Michele Tafoya podcast brought to you by Genucel. Do you remember that movie with Jack Black called School of Rock, where he teaches all the kids to play instruments and they go and compete as a rock band? And it's really fun. Well, there's a book out now called School of Woke by Kenny Xu. How did CRT get into our academic situations, into our school systems, into education at all? He's going to explain. That's next.
Now, it's time for some sanity. It's the Michele Tafoya podcast.
So we've all been talking about CRT, critical race theory. Some people have just heard of it. It's hard for people to actually define what it is. Our next guest is going to try to do that for us and tell us how it's gotten into classrooms, why, and what we can do about it, if anything, if you care to. Kenny Xu, the author of this book, is coming up next. First, though, I want you to remind yourself to take a look in the mirror, ladies, and see if there are some dark spots, because they're not going away on their own. Introducing the Dark Spot Corrector from Genucel right in time for summer. So this Dark Spot Corrector has not one, but 3 cutting-edge ingredients that goes to work fast to target sunspots, dark spots, liver spots, and even old discoloration both on your face and your hands. You're gonna be really surprised by how fast this stuff works and how you see results. You can now enjoy your summer at the beach, at the park, at the barbecues, at the baseball games without the embarrassing spots. With Genucel, you will see results or your money back. No questions asked. So go to Genucel.com right now. Get your dark spot corrector with the new Genucel most popular package, now featuring summer essentials like the best-selling Ultra Retinol Moisturizer with a powerful retinol alternative that's safe to use in the summer sun. Visit Genucel.com/Michele right now for the amazing summer essentials and save over 70% off Genucel's most popular package. Don't wait. Order Genucel's most popular package right now. Free shipping, free returns, and the best luxury skincare you've ever used, all at 70% off. Genucel.com/Michele. Remember, it's Michele with one L, Michele. Genucel.com/Michele, Genucel.com/Michele. All orders will include a mystery luxury gift while they last. Genucel.com/Michele. Coming up, Kenny Xu on wokeness, CRT in the classroom. The School of Woke is the book. He is next. Kenny Xu, welcome and congratulations on the book, School of Woke. It is #1 in the education policy category on Amazon. So that's a good sign. It sounds like people are interested. Why are you the right person to tell this story, Kenny?
Because it's back to school, and what I've seen investigating my 2 years of research into the school boards in the United States, really in response to the rising parent concerns over critical race theory and gender ideology in schools, I have seen that school boards have fundamentally ignored their responsibility to children and have instead served activist and woke interests over the interests of children. And my book seeks to expose that.
Yeah, it seems to me children are a big topic lately, and they seem to be bearing the brunt of all these desires and goals of older people who can speak louder and put more pressure on school boards, as you mentioned. But I want to get down to some of the brass tacks of this, because I think some people they want to be able to define certain terms. So let's start with CRT, critical race theory, which some people think that's not going on. You're cherry picking. There's a school or two here or there. Well, clearly it's pervasive enough that people are noticing it, responding to it in one fashion or another. So let's define critical race theory as it exists, not in law school, but in the lower education system in America.
Critical race theory believes that America is still a racist country as long as disparities between white and black kids still exist. At least that's the educational definition. So what I mean by that is, for example, if there is a racial achievement gap in this country, which there is, by the way, there's a significant one between black students and white students. Critical race theory would say that means that racism is still in our institutions.
So in other words, there would be no other variable. It's just that we're a racist country. There's no other variable involved here. we're just racist.
Right. It doesn't have to do with culture. It doesn't have to do with the 75% out of wedlock rate. It doesn't have to do with, poor discipline policies or inner city crime, which is highly correlated with low achievement, but it has to do with white racism, basically.
Yeah, this is and white children are paying a price to a great extent because they are being called, privileged and oppressive, and most of these kids don't even know what the hell people are talking about, and they're being labeled. And to me, it's just so harmful. Plus, you're also telling kids of color, the only reason you're not achieving is because of the color of your skin, which is clearly, I think you've done the research, and it's not the case. We've seen parents become more interested in this topic since the pandemic, right? When they got to see what was going on in their kids' classrooms. How far back, though, do you think CRT goes in terms of its existence in these classrooms?
In my book, School of Woke, I chronicle its historical rise. It really goes back to two separate events. One, the ability of Marxists like Herbert Marcuse, who invented critical theory back in the 50s and 60s in academia, to position America along a privileged and oppressed scale. The Europeans were able to do it by class, but the critical theorists came in, they wanted to do it by race because America has a much more maligned history of racism. The second part is a separate event. It's the teaching of critical conscientization studies by another Marxist educator in South America named Paulo Freire, who taught this book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is in every education school in America. It says the best way to teach children is to make them aware of their place in this world. What he means by place in this world is their status on the privilege and oppression hierarchy. Those two events merged the racial tension and the critical conscientization and birthed critical race theory.
Yeah, certainly the summer of 2020 was a moment in this country where whatever people believe, people called it a racial reckoning. This death of George Floyd on the streets of Minneapolis, which is near me, where I live and where I produce this show. So we saw it very up close, and boom, that one singular moment seemed to kind of serve as a nadir almost for more of this, for the justification of this. Would you say that moment was impactful?
I would say yes. It was probably the nadir of American life racially. But we have been, honestly, our culture had been declining in that sphere for the past 7 years before that too. Race relations was at a high in 2008 when it was 70%, including blacks and whites, who believed that race relations were good. By 2020, it was down to 25%, and now it's even lower. So, and what happened? Was there more racism that happened in this country? No, it wasn't more racism that precipitated that, but it was this teaching in our education system that we are a fundamentally racist country, that color blindness is bad, that merit equals white supremacy. It was the promulgating of these ideologies into our media and then finally our education system that promulgated that precipitous decline.
The term color blindness catches my ear because I've heard it. I've heard it used in a positive light, but I've certainly heard it used in a negative light, although it is as though it is something bad, negative, color blindness. So what is that term all about? What does it mean? And why are there two sides to it?
Color blindness means that we should strive to treat people as an individual without respect to their skin color, meaning that I'm approaching you, Michele, in this conversation, just trying to have a conversation without making assumptions about your background or your status based on the color of your skin. Mm-hmm. Of course, that is antithetical to critical race theory. Critical race theory believes that if you are white, you have certain privileges that is just baked into your life experience. And I argue in my book, School of Woke, that's the wrong way to teach children. And I do believe in the next 20 years, critical race theory is just going to be one of those topics that every parent is going to have to be aware of. They're going to have to teach their children how to counter that in the home, individualized dinner table conversations. Say, honey, Johnny, I think that your friend Marcus over there, just because he's a dark colored skinned person, does not mean he's any less of a person or more of a person. He is your friend. You should treat them as an individual. That is the way we have to approach these dinner time conversations.
So you're saying over the next 20 years, this effort has to go on to combat what has already sort of been germinating and taking root in the schools. Where is the responsibility on the teachers, on the administrators in the American school system, in the government school system, to say this is Marxist? I mean, you've mentioned the names, the people, the backgrounds, the setup for this whole theory is Marxist. So when is it incumbent on the schools themselves to do something to change this?
I think that the buck still has to stop with the superintendent. And what I mean by, and the administration, what I mean by that is Loudoun County, which was a county that I investigated as part of School Woke. It's a wealthy county in Virginia. They were assaulted by basically the race narrative back in 2019. The NAACP, which we think is supposed to be a good organization, but has evolved into a very bad organization, assaulted this county school, saying that there's racism in the district. They pointed out this isolated incident where this PE teacher accidentally assigned the role of a slave in an Underground Railroad exercise. They made a big deal about that. And then they asked to put their own DEI consultants into the LCPS, Loudoun County school system. At that point, the superintendent should have said, no, we're going to crack down. We do not believe our parents are racist. We do not believe our teachers are racist. We're going to defend the dignity of our teachers. But he didn't. The superintendent let those people in. They let them basically run an audit of the school, which naturally produced a startling account of systemic racism in the school district, even though there wasn't, and basically allowed those race vultures to profit off of the $1.8 billion school system that was Loudoun County.
We've heard a lot about Loudoun County. Certainly, there have been a number of things. You mentioned also the critical gender theory, I guess. Can we call it that? Is that what it is?
It is, because it's assigning a privileged oppressed dynamic. Critical just means privileged oppressed.
Okay.
It's assigning a privileged oppressed dynamic to basically being queer. So, of course, right now it's sexy to be queer. It's popular to be queer.
Yeah.
The percentage of kids identifying as queer has gone up from 5% to 25% in just one generation. And schools, the reason why is simply because schools are encouraging that in the name of gender activism. So yeah, this is an ideology that has to be fought too, because when you start identifying people as oppressed, you allow them to take advantage of teachers, you allow them to misbehave. A fourth grader who, wears a dress, is allowed to practice sexual practices within the classroom that any normal person would not be allowed to practice. So this is an ideology that has to be cracked down on.
Well, it's interesting because when you use the term crackdown, people are going to say, what are you saying? You're saying that, because there's this large contingent of Americans who protect trans kids. And this is new. Like, this is not something that I ever saw in grade school. This is not something that I saw in my kids' first 8-10 years of grade school. This is recent. And again, this explosion of it seems to align with what you're talking about, with this notion of victimology, if you will, that if I am trans, you think lesser of me. I get to call you a transphobe if you question anything I do, and therefore I get some advantage out of that. Do I have that right?
I think so. I think you have that right. I talked with a Virginia teacher named Karen. You'll read about it in School of Woke, but basically she runs a fifth grade primarily Spanish speaking, primarily illegal immigrant classroom. And there is, a kid who identifies as queer in this classroom, and he insists on being called by his pronouns. He insists on basically being allowed to flirt, kiss in the classroom, those kinds of things. And the standard is lowered for this kid in terms of discipline standards, because she feels like if she were to call him out on it, recommend him to the principal, she would be the one in trouble, not the kid. That is an undermining of the traditional teacher-student authority that should be happening in the classroom. So what I mean by cracking down is not in any way hateful. It just means we shouldn't be lowering the discipline or behavioral standards for people who identify as queer.
Well, I agree. And I just wish we would treat people as individuals and not as categories, because what you've described there is someone taking advantage of this categorization of being queer, so that I have now advantages in the classroom that kids who don't identify that way don't have. Again, I'll get back to shame on the schools for caving. This DEI industry is quite something, but I'll push back on this. Where are the parents? What is their role? I realize that you focused on schools here, but how much feedback did you get from people about parents being participants in this whole thing?
Oh man, I talk about the parents and why the parents need to get more engaged than ever. One, I talk about the individual conversation that parents need to have, which we've already touched on. But two, I talk about some of the activists, the great parents who are holding students accountable, in PTA school board meetings in Santa Barbara County, California, another school district I heavily investigated. I talk about a ragtag group of parents taking on the public school system for basically protecting an alleged sexual predator in the classroom, who was, he was very woke and he was promoting ethnic studies and promoting critical race theory. He was very important to the school district. They did not want to let him go. But the parents, he was speaking and not speaking. He was harassing young girls, basically, in a physical way. And the parents were able to speak out and get him fired. But the school district did not want him fired. So parents can stand up. They can make a difference at their local meetings, but they do have to stand up, because if you are not aware and you're not vigilant in the school system, you will allow these woke ideologues to take advantage of you and your kid.
Well, that leads to another problem here. Listen, I've talked to parents who are afraid to speak out on behalf of their kids, who are afraid to question, to raise their hand in a school board meeting to say, I don't agree with X, Y, or Z, because they feel that their kid will then be targeted, that their kid may be on the hook for, then we'll just lower that grade a little bit. Remember that kid's parents at the school board meeting? Yeah. So there is that fear, and I don't think it's illegitimate. What do you make of that concern by parents that they're going to be doing harm to their kids and their kids' reputation and maybe their success in school if they do speak up?
Well, first of all, I want to express empathy. Yes, it is hard when you have your kid in the school system. You may feel like there might be retribution. I would say this is when principled activists and politicians have to arise. And I'm serious about that, because we do need to go and we need to elect people who will keep our schools safe, who will raise the standards for our children, who will stand up for their children, who don't have that level of leverage that the school system has over those kids. So that's what American politics and democracy is all about. I would say take back that effort, understand what the true purpose of the American political system is, elect those candidates, have those nonprofits like Color Us United, which is the group that I run, colorusunited.org. We advocate against CRT in a race-blind society. That's what we want. Have those people come in and speak on your behalf so you're not alone. Key is to come in numbers, and you can win. These ideologues, they are well-funded, but they are not that smart. And you can beat people in the public square on that.
colorusunited.org. How do you operate? What is it that you actually do?
If you have a complaint against a business or an institution, a college, that is really, a principled complaint, right? That is discriminating on the basis of race, teaching a privileged oppressed dynamic, or, in some way is harming, your kids' futures in a way that is unprincipled and unbecoming of the American spirit, then you contact us. And we've stood up for people, in those negotiations Also, at an advocacy level, we run media campaigns to fight back against diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that you and I know are inherently discriminatory because they're solely based on race. We had a victory at the medical school of North Carolina, UNC Medical School, one of the most prestigious medical schools in the nation. We're trying to train doctors. We're trying to promote doctors based on race, not based on merit. And we came in and we forced them to rescind that DEI framework that they did through lobbying, activism, social media, and writing. So that's what we can do.
It's interesting. I'm hearing a lot about North Carolina these days. Obviously, they were part of that affirmative action case recently. And, I've heard of a lot of activity at North Carolina from the top down and from the bottom up. Some people saying this is a place where we are going to be, we are going to preach diversity, equity, and inclusion. But some of the other administrators saying, look, we've got to have free speech on campus. We've got to respect the rights of every student. We've got to reward merit, et cetera. So with your unique perspective on North Carolina, is that sort of a hot spot right now? What's going on there?
You're right. Look, I'm a North Carolina resident, and this is, I think, one of the critical issues in North Carolina right now, which is, I think North Carolina is becoming a hotbed of this tension between merit and DEI and race ideology. It's really cool to actually see North Carolina have to snap back to the public will, because everybody thinks UNC is a very liberal school, which is true, but they've recently gotten some administrators and publicly appointed, that is government appointed by the will of the people, administrators that are really cracking down on this ideology and standing up for merit, because North Carolinians know that we don't care about the race of our doctor. We care about the most qualified doctor. So Color Rush United, my group, we came in and all we did was really speak to that understanding of North Carolinians. And that's how we were able to be successful.
It's a really interesting thing to watch, just as Loudoun County has been sort of a bellwether on a lot of these issues. I often wonder, Kenny, if the toothpaste is out of the tube. And if there is really going back, you've kind of outlined that you think there's this 20-year window in which we can really, each and every one of us, activate on whichever side of this we believe in. But where do you think the majority of people lie on this? I hear a lot of people they don't care. They want their kids taught CRT, even though some of them don't even know what it means. They protect trans kids. They're letting kids sort of make these rules about what they want to be called in the classroom, and that we must respect that even if the parents don't know about it and parental rights are suffering. So it almost feels like there's been this avalanche. And sometimes I wonder if we're going to dig out just what's your perspective on the sort of the weight of the people on one side versus the other? Where are we?
I said it was going to be a 20-year conversation about CRT that we're going to need to have as an individual conversations. But I think that principled activism can work in the span of just 1 or 2 years. Look at what happened in Virginia. Because of the efforts of principled activists in Virginia, parent activists, Azra Nomani is my friend who worked specifically in Northern Virginia. They elected Glenn Youngkin over Terry McAuliffe. Yes. That's a huge victory that I cover in my book. People don't understand. They think, oh, well, Glenn Youngkin isn't doing that much. Yeah, but you know what he's not doing? He's not doing what Terry McAuliffe would have done, because Terry McAuliffe was insistently aligned with the teachers' unions and the left woke ideology in the Virginia platform. And he would have turned that state even further downhill. So that was how activism stood up and won in the political sphere. In North Carolina, standing up for merit and against DEI, we delivered a significant blow to DEI at the medical school. In California, we are able to stand up. I mean, there are parents who I cover who are standing up against the physical and ideological grooming of children, and getting the bad actors fired out of place through vigilance. Those things are happening right now They're happening in your communities, but you need to be a part of a group. You can't stand alone in this, but there are groups fighting back in every state.
Well, and if people want to find out more about how they can get involved, colorsunited.org, and get this book, School of Woke, How Critical Race Theory Infiltrated American Schools and Why We Must Reclaim Them. You can get it on Amazon. It's the #1 new release in education policy right now, which I looked at some of the competition. You should be proud of this, Kenny. That's quite something. I'm eager to read the book from start to finish. I've given it a perusal and I'm fascinated again. Look, I'm the daughter of a school teacher. I don't think now she's been retired for quite some time, but she hears about this stuff and she's mind blown. This didn't used to be part of the public schools in America, which used to be lauded as some of the best in the world. We need to get that status back for the sake of our kids, not for our teachers, not for our professors, but for the sake of these children. Anyway, congratulations on the book, Kenny. I appreciate your time so much today. Best of luck.
Thank you.
He's Kenny Xu. The book is School of Woke, How Critical Race Theory Infiltrated American Schools and Why We Must Reclaim Them. And you can find out more at colorsunited.org as well if you want to get something going. That's a place to start. So in the meantime, thanks for listening. As I say at the end of every podcast, be brave, because that's what this is going to require. It's a little bravery, and do good. And we'll see you next time.